Hey folks, today I wanted to tell you about the history of paper computer games. So, the history is divided into basically 3 eras. The first era started a very long time ago. We call this Series 1. This is kind of an unofficial title because we never officially titled it at the time, but that's what we refer to it as now, so that's what I'll call it. Series 1 started when Chris made his first PCG. We were very little kids. We were like 6 and 7 or something like that. I was hanging out at his house, and he made a game, and his game followed the character of Zach, which is me. His first games were just, sort of based on real life, but going off into fantastical directions. And he didn't believe that I liked it, but I was just enthralled. The very first game, it was real. It felt, yeah, now thinking back on the story of that game, it's a little bit cartoonish, but at the time it felt real and intriguing, and there was so much I wanted to know about this world. So he kept making games, and I kept playing. So throughout this whole era, he kept making a lot of games. He must have made over 100 of them. He made games all the time for a while, and they were numbered. I remember for some reason there was an anniversary issue, number 79. And during this series, he built up sort of a mythology. At first, it was just, following the character of Zach in his adventures. But then Zach started to gain new allies that, don't exist in real life. Some of them did. Some of my real friends made it into the series. But I also gained new allies like Zuvak, the robotic clown on a stick. And I started to regularly fighting against an evil organization that's only known as the Company. So I will represent this era with Zuvak. Very simple Zuvak, as it were. He was like a robot. He's like on a tripod, and he has this giant green hair sticking out. So that was Zuvak, and he was my most prominent ally. I rescued him. He was originally built by the Company, but I rescued him and reprogrammed him, and now he's been helping me fight them. He has become one of the longest-running characters in paper computer games. I'll probably make a video about him at some point. During this time, I kind of tried my hand at making my own PCGs a little bit. A couple here and there. Mine... I didn't really know what I was doing. Chris had really gotten into the rhythm of it. He knew, he worked out all the kinks. He knew how to make a PCG. He had a formula, and he stuck to it, and it worked. I was kind of fumbling around in the dark, and my games at the time never really took off. And, but I did try making a few of them. A few of those survived, and, so after a while, unfortunately, we fell out of the habit, and of playing PCGs in this era came to an end. So years went by. We had mostly forgotten about PCGs. Every now and then, Chris would bring it up and say, hey, if I made another PCG, would you still want to play it? And I'd be like, yeah, totally. And he would, but then, fade back into obscurity. So that is the end of the whole Series 1 era. Years and years and years went by. And it was kind of sad. And then began the Series 2 era. Series 2 started when Chris revived his old games. He made another game that's still starring Zach and Zuvak and, building on that whole mythology. continuing that series of adventures. But he just started going in new directions, expanding the mythology a little bit. He transported Zack into new dimensions and new, worlds, and had him, travel through time, and so he created his brought it back with 2 new games, and he labeled them Series 2, number 1 and number 2. They were called Till Time Do Us Part, and etc., and so on and so forth. So I was inspired by that, and I was thinking about it. And then when I was hanging out with another friend, we have, like, at the time we were regularly going to the community center, where we hung, like, we're actually homeschooled, so we didn't have school, so we had to, we went to the community center as our source of socialization at the time. So Palm was over my house one time, and I said, what Chris and I used to do? And I tried making a game again for the first time to demonstrate it to her. And this game was called Evil League of Evilness. I won't write out the full title there. And at the time, I basically just wanted to demonstrate what Chris's games were like. So for the most part, I started by imitating Chris's games. I took the same tropes and the same characters and the same ideas. So Zuvak came back, and this was very much set in the same mythology. It's very much a continuation of Chris's ideas, but kind of a spin-off of it. The idea was that while Zack is off having adventures, new characters, Pierre and Ari, appear and start having adventures of their own. They team up with Zuvak also. So this is very much set in the same world, the same universe. So there was that game. Then I made another one, sequel to that. I called it The Alien Abduction. And then, like, once I'd started making them, I kind of got really into the idea. It was a lot of fun. So I kept making games, and as I did, they strayed away from this original idea. All of my games, for the most part, stuck within this same universe. So but I got away from that central storyline. So for example, in the second game at the end, Pierre and Ari crash land on an alien planet called Shri, and then in the third game, I made a game that's all about the backstory of the planet Shri. So as you can see, it still has a connection to this storyline, but it's just set on an alien world, and with different characters that you've never seen before. And as I kept going, I added more worlds and more stories, and built up on them. And by the way, you can see all of these games in my YouTube series, my old paper computer games. You can see kind of my progression. The games in that series so far are all my Series 2 era games. I don't have any from my Series 1 era games on there yet, though I do still have some of those games. So if you guys are interested, I could make a future video about that. But in any event, I was building on these concepts, and I keep tying them in. I finally made my biggest game. This is kind of scribbling over itself. This is called Balzac Lobotron. And Balzac Lobotron was a massive, it is its own storyline, Balzac Lobotron, and introduces a new character. But it also ties in stories from all my previous games, Chris's previous games. Zuvak is in it, all sorts of characters who are in it. Oh, I'll draw a representation of my most signature character from this era is called Genghis. He is the king of the Zerelta people I aforementioned, and his thing is that he's holding up a power staff. So that is Genghis to represent this whole section. So yeah, Balzac Lobotron had Genghis, it had Zuvak, it had, this whole thing, and it really binds together this whole universe of stories and really establishes, that, it is one big world, and that this world has a lot more mysteries than we knew before. So I'm still, developing this whole world. So around this time, I came over, you know, my other friends, Keith and Kurt, they're brothers, and they, I just brought my whole PCG collection and just like all of these and just showed them to them and explained, you know, basically like I do in my, you know, my old paper computer game videos. And the next time I went over their house, Keith had made a PCG of his own with some help from Kurt. That was called, it was around this time, it was called Zach to the Future. And that introduced, you know, returned to Zach as a character, but it introduced a lot of new ideas, new character, and this was a super deadly world. So this really established them as like strong new paper computer game makers, and their Keith's, you know, enemies, the 8-balls, have become a staple of all paper computer games. They've appeared in my games. They've appeared in, you know, they're all over the place. You can see them in my Pokemon Stop series. They're everywhere, and they're evil, and everyone hates them. So they're like super deadly. But anyway, from there, Kurt started making his own games without Keith. He made another one that's sort of a sequel to that called Spaceballs, where the 8-balls have moved on and they've developed their entire spacefaring civilization, all devoted to the hatred of Zach. And Spaceballs was really an epic spacefaring adventure. It stars an unknown guy, and he meets another robot called Tutorial Bot, and he goes on a series of just epic adventures across this alien planet. So Kurt really established himself as a strong voice in the PCG community. So this whole thing was expanding. It was no longer just me and Chris. Now we have Keith and Kurt. They you know, Kurt started making a lot of games, like a lot, and some of these are really good games. And you know, around this time, you know, I had introduced my friend Pom to PCGs, and she started making her own. Her games were really well thought out, and like she's just naturally well, I don't know about natural, but she practiced for a really long time. She's a really good artist, and her games were really thought out, researched. They include all sorts of lore from Greek mythology, from the Bible, from, you know, all sorts of, you know, ideas and mythos and alchemy and everything. And the puzzles are really, really well, you know. So those are her two games. Well, the first one is Genesis. The second one is Exile. And, you know, these are sequels. She also did a third one that was sort of a prequel to those two called Lost Testament. So, yeah, so PCGs were growing. They were really expanding. And, you know, but still, it's all still expanding this one, you know, sort of mythology. By the way, I'll draw Tutorial Bot to show. He's just kind of like a hovering robot. He's emblematic of this part of PCG history. So, yeah, after a while, unfortunately, again, we started, like I was really hopeful that this would continue to grow, that this would, you know, and at the time, I started, you know, I even made an encyclopedia of paper computer games. Like, it was just a text file. Well, it started as a timeline. I made a timeline of the events in this universe, you know, which, you know, is a summary of the events organized into a timeline. Then I started adding sections for, like, biographies of the characters, you know, that, like, mentions all their appearances, and so on and so forth. That encyclopedia, you know, I showed it to everybody. It evolved into the wiki, the paper computer games wiki, which I'll make a video on soon. And so, yeah, I'd hoped that this whole thing would continue to grow, but unfortunately, we fell out of the habit, and so this era, Series 2, came to an end, and a lot of my games went unfinished, a lot of Kurt's games went unfinished. We just kind of fell out of the habit, forgot how all of our games worked, and and years went by, and PCGs were, for all intents and purposes, dead. So it was quite a shame. And then I decided to bring it back again. And that brings us to the third era. The reason I brought it back, I was just thinking about it. I just happened to be going over my old games, and I was like, I put so much work into this. It sucks that they're going to go unplayed, and no one's ever going to experience this stuff, that, this is just, the whole idea of paper computer games is just over. It's just going to die. No one else is going to experience it. So I said, you know what? Let's play this out. I called Chris and I said, you know what? Let's finish playing that paper computer game we never finished. Let's just do it. Why not? So he did. He came over. He finished playing Balzac Lobotron, which he never finished playing because, honestly, that game, I just made it way too long. That game has well over 100 pages. It's a gigantic, biggest paper computer game ever. But it was way too ambitious because it took so much work and it still wasn't done. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Point is, Chris came over and we finally finished Balzac Lobotron. I also got together with Ari and we played through his game that he'd never finished playing, and it hung out with Palm, finished playing her game that she'd never finished playing, and this kind of jogged everyone's memory, I think. So, at the beginning of this era, Chris made his first new game in quite a while, and that was called Ghosts. And that was, unlike his other PCGs this whole time, and my PCGs, Ghosts is the first game to really break from the whole, established PCG world, the whole established storyline. We don't know for sure if it takes place in the same world as the other PCGs. It might, but he just didn't say that it does. So, for all in a future game, there could be a crossover between these characters and those characters. But, for now, we just don't know. But, in any event, Ghosts was really innovative. It was a really interesting game in which, for the first time, you play as a ghost. And it lets you, you can go through walls and floors, and the goal is to, a family of the living has moved out of your house, and you have to scare them out of your house. And that concept ends up being a lot of fun. The story is interesting. It's got really great mysteries. The characters are entertaining. It was just all around a fantastic game. A great way to usher in a new era of PCG making. So that was Chris's first game, and he has plans for more PCGs, which again will take place in their own worlds, he says. Will not return to the Ghosts world or any of the older, stuff. So, but I'm very interested to see what those are about. Meantime, I started the PCG YouTube channel. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the first era was called Series 1, the second era was called Series 2. When Chris made Ghosts, he labeled it as the first episode of PCG Mark III. So around this time, I started the PCG YouTube. Because I wanted to show you guys. I felt like this was a really cool concept, and I felt like it just bothered me that we're the only ones who get to experience PCG awesomeness. I wanted to share this with you guys, with everyone. So I started the YouTube, and around so I wanted to make a new game. I made Pokemon Stop. Pokemon Stop was kind of a new game in that it it allows you to choose Pokemon. It basically, unlike a traditional PCG, where in a traditional PCG you use items you find to solve puzzles, like, you know, you'll pick up a baseball and you'll throw it at a lever or whatever. You know, that's usually how you solve puzzles, or it's one way you solve puzzles anyway. In Pokemon Stop, I wanted to make a game that plays with that a little bit, and instead you catch Pokemon and you use their abilities in creative ways to solve the puzzles. So, and also there would be a battle feature, and, you know, also noteworthy feature of Pokemon Stop, it's the first augmented reality PCG in that you can actually go out physically in the real world, just like in Pokemon Go, and catch Pokemon out there. So that's a first for PCGs. And I also made another new game, which you guys have not seen yet, but we've actually filmed the first 2 episodes, so those will be up soon. And that is a PCG that returns to the classic PCG storyline that we've been following this entire time. That is, the game is actually starring Zuvak, and it is the game's full title is Zuvak: The Life and Times of a Clown on a Stick. And it is about Zuvak's origin story from Zuvak's own perspective. So, you know, that is my contribution. And the other exciting development is that now I am no longer, like, our group of friends is no longer the only people making PCGs, because now we've seen, because of the YouTube channel, some new people have been introduced to the concept, and we've had a new game in the works called Area 51 by Radioactive Computer Games, who is a new YouTuber who is not part of our friends group. He's, you know, and he is starting this new game, which I'm very much looking forward to finding out more about. It's a game set in Area 51, which has been abandoned by scientists because the entities that they created to protect the planet have turned evil, and now, you know, you play as a guy trapped in the base with these evil entities. So that is pretty exciting. And another guy, Salman Ahmada, again, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, is making his own PCG that is entitled Project Z. So in this era, PCG Mark III that is still going on, PCGs have grown beyond our circle of friends. So it's like, the first era is like just me and Chris. Second era is like, you know, expands to like more people. We created the wiki, we created, you know, all this stuff. Third era, we created the YouTube, and for the first time it expands outside of our circle of friends. So, like, it is once again an exciting time to you know, be a PCG maker, PCG person. And there's a lot going on in this world, and I've been, you know, I have so many ideas I want to do. Like, there's so many PCGs I want to work on, and, you know, I want to flesh out this storyline. I want to, you know, build on what has already been built and expand this mythology further. So I'm super excited to do that. I'm super excited to see what games, you know, new people make, and yeah, this is awesome. So I just wanted to share with you this history, and yeah, so that's all I have for now, folks. Thanks for watching.